.327 Federal Magnum versus 9mm. What we have today is our Federal HST ammunition. Our .327 Federal Magnum is a 140 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 1500 feet per second. And our 9mm is a 124 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 1150 feet per second. So I'm going to use my 4.2 inch Ruger SP101 to test the .327 Federal Magnum, and my 5-inch barrel M&P 9 2.0 to test the 9mm. So if you didn't know, when you're talking barrel measurements, the chamber is included in a semi-automatic and it's not in a revolver. So a 5-inch semi-automatic is actually very, very similar to a 4-inch revolver for the amount of barrel travel you have in a firearm. So 5-inch semi-auto, 4-inch revolver, about the same size overall. Start of the bullet right there, start of the bullet right about there. Very, very similar. So this is a fair way to test these. So I'm going to see what we get with these. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way to potentially clog a hollow point or anything like that. And then we'll move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents a pectoral muscle. After that, we're going to have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics. Then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So when we're talking 3 inches and 16 inches, it's more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches. So we're really trying to simulate a 9.5 inch individual with ribs in there for our real world simulation test. So we'll do a plain clear ballistics best potential shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, so our velocity rating is through 4-inch barrels with both of these. So I'm going to use my 5-inch M&P and then my 4.2 inch Ruger SP101. So theoretically, we should have higher than rated velocity with both of these, but you never know with ammo what you're going to get. So first up, we have our 9mm 124 grain jacketed hollow point rated at 1150 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see what I get through my 5-inch barrel here. 1206, 1164, 1179, 1167, 1210. So not super consistent, but just a little bit above that rated velocity. So our .327 Federal Magnum 104 grain, we are rated at 1500 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So I'm going to use my 4.2 inch Ruger SP101 and see what we get with this. See how close we get to 1500 feet per second. .1478, 1481, 1467, 1472, 1475. So we are below that rated velocity, but the consistency is very, very good with this. So I'm liking that velocity consistency with this. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up, we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. No denim in the way to potentially clog a hollow point. No rib simulation in the way to potentially slow down its penetration. So let's see if we get in our plain clear ballistics shot with our 9mm. All right, let's hit that with our .327 Federal Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so both of these look pretty good for our damage and penetration and expansion and all of that. A little bit more energy dump with our .327 versus our 9mm, just because it is moving very, very fast. So 9mm .327 Federal, 9mm .327. So it's a little bit more energy dump, which just simply means more opening up of that hollow point right away. So I believe it would open up fully expanded in this first 3 inches, a little bit better than the 9mm did. And the first part of this block, I can see that too, is the hole is a little bit bigger going into the main block with our 327 Federal. And along the whole path, I mean, our 9mm did pretty good, but our definitely our 327 has a little bit more damage going on there. So what we got with our 9mm is about 13 3/4 inches of penetration. I know camera parallax will make that look like it's a little bit further than that, but looking from a straight on view where the camera doesn't stretch, we're at 13 3/4 with our 9mm and some good expansion. Now our 327 Federal, we're at about 14 1/4 inches. So, you know, only just a little bit more with that 327 Federal, but both of them look like they did pretty well. So let's put on our denim, put on our rib simulations, and see how these will do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back of that to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how our 9mm does in our real world simulation. All right, that moved that quite a bit. Let me set that all back up and we'll hit it with the 327 Federal now. All right, real world simulation, 327 Federal Magnum. Let's see how this compares. Let's go take a look. And with our 327, it moved everything. This block came off this shelf a couple inches there. Whole thing moved quite a bit there. And we look at our first 3 inches here. You know, a little bit more energy dump with our 327 versus our 9mm. So I'll admit here, our 9mm did pretty well. And if we look at our rib simulation here, both of them I would say are pretty equal, except I would say the percentage of expansion looks bigger with our 327 because the hole through here actually looks a tad bigger than this, and it started out smaller. So our 327 definitely dumps that energy. Now our 9mm did quite well, and you know, a lot of people accuse me of hating on the 9mm, and I do, and the reason why is because so many times I see terrible performance with it. I just don't see anything that looks that good. Typically what I see is not a whole lot of damage going on in here, and then it goes to the rib simulation and then very slowly expands, and that type of performance doesn't necessarily relate very well to the real world you know, stopping power. Traditionally rounds that expand right away do a little bit better, but with this HST and being a standard pressure and just expanding right away, and you can see that because right here when we first entered the gel block, it's expanding. This is a very good 9mm round, so I'm not hating on this one. This is fantastic performance with our 9mm. And we went to 16 inches of penetration with our 9mm. And our 327 Federal dumped a little more energy quicker. And in this gel block, it's just as wide of a channel right here. It's just that it's going horizontally and not vertically, so you don't see it as wide right there. But very, very similar to the 9mm overall. I would say basically equal between these two as far as the damage goes, but a little bit less penetration, and that's obvious why. There's 20 grains less weight, so you know it's gonna slow down. It doesn't have quite as much mass there, but what we got going on here is 14, I'll give it 14 3/4 inches of penetration. So what I'm seeing here is a win-win on all accounts here. Both of these did really, really well. And this is one of those things, it's like, well, in gel testing, they did equal. That means they're going to do equal in a real world situation. That's not necessarily true. That's why it makes it so hard sometimes with looking at two good performing rounds, because they'll do equal in a gel test. But sometimes just a little bit extra energy and velocity does equate to, you know, just a shock effect that seems to stop threats a little bit faster. So My gut opinion here is going to say that, you know, one round of 327 is going to be a little more effective than one round of 9mm. But then the 9mm people are going to say, well, there's a lot of capacity there, and you got that, you know, in that pistol 18 times versus 6 times in that revolver, and that could be something that could factor into to this as well. But what I'm seeing here, though, is both did fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with both doing fantastic. So let's pull these out of the block. I'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 9mm and our 327 Federal Magnum. So our 9mm performed really, really well. And I've thought for a long time that 9mm, the HST 9mm, performs better than Gold Dot and any other brand. I still to this day think it's probably the best choice in 9mm overall. I think the Federal 9BPLE is a good choice too, but just overall, our HST, even a standard pressure, is probably the best 9mm ammo out there. And our 327 Federal, got one pedal that sticks out kind of far, but overall pretty consistent expansion overall. I'd say the size, you know, it started out a lot smaller, so the size is going to be a little bit smaller, but it still dumped that energy and did a lot of damage. So both of them look really, really good overall. And we look at our rounds going through our rib simulation and denim. It's hard to tell these apart. The only way I can tell them apart from looking at them right here is that the 9mm I know is a 124 grain, so it's got more weight on the base there than the 327, but they both expanded quite well. There's our 9mm. Our denim and rib simulation. Very, very good performance overall. Most bullets, even Gold Dot, will shrink down quite a bit, but these HSTs with these nice thick petals, they remain larger, and obviously larger is going to be more effective. And our 327 Federal, just as good of expansion, probably even a higher percentage of expansion like I was thinking through when I was looking at the rib simulation, because there's not a big difference in the size. But this one started out like 31 caliber, and this one's close to 36 caliber. So, you know, almost 5 caliber bigger, but yet it ended up about the same size. So that's pretty impressive, and you know, there's no wonder why that happened. There's a lot of velocity there. So, yeah, very, very perfect performance, I would say, overall with both of these. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm just going to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So I'm just going to get a front sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, see if there's really a big practical difference in my ability to place more than one round on target. And this is a very fair test because this pistol weighs about 27.5 ounces, something like that. This revolver, 29.5 ounces, but because there's like 13 rounds in this currently and only 6 in here, the weight is almost identical between these two, so that really gives me a good idea of, you know, the difference in felt recoil and all that. So I'm just gonna get a front sight picture, see how easy it is for me to place more than one shot. So I'm gonna do 6 shots here. All right, the 9mm shoots pretty well. You know, it does jump the muzzle just a little bit, but there's not a lot of recoil going on there. 327 Federal. Let's see what this does for me. All right, so a little bit more recoil. I'm not gonna lie, a little bit more. Most 327 Federals don't have that much recoil. This one has just a tad more than typical 327 Federal, but it's still very, very low. It's way less than a 357 Magnum. I would say the recoil of this is about like a 9mm plus P out of a subcompact pistol, as where 9mm out of this full-size pistol is like no recoil. This has a little bit of recoil, but it's not that bad at all. If you're used to shooting like a 3-inch 9mm with plus P ammo, kind of like what you're going to feel in this 4.2-inch SP101. So not bad at all. So let's back it up. I'm going to see what I can do from a little more distance with these. All right, 75 yards from the target. I'm not suggesting that people should train from 75 yards. I just like to come back to shoot from 75 yards. It's fun for me. It's a challenge. You know, it's a long ways away and it's fun to hit a target at that distance. And sometimes, you know, this distance will tell you a little bit about the ammo, because any issues with accuracy will be multiplied at distance. And I kind of like to see, just for myself, if they will still hit the target fine, because that will guarantee for me in my mind that if I needed to make a shot at like 25 yards, this is more than accurate enough. So that's kind of why I do this. So 9mm. Standard pressure 9mm out of this pistol is usually pretty darn accurate. So let's see what I can get with this from 75 yards. Alright, not too bad overall. I did pull one. That's all on me. I was focusing a little bit too much on the target and not enough on my front sight there. That's really what happened there. So 327 Federal. Let me fire one single action and see where these land. It landed right on the target. Definitely saving all my 327 brass for some upcoming hand loading videos. So let me fire these double action. Just kind of see how they feel for me. All right, so I think that, you know, I may have missed some. I'm not really sure, because these things move so fast that when they hit the steel and make a ringing, you know, the boom and sound from the gun is still, that's all I'm hearing. So I'm not sure if I'm missing some of those or not. But I definitely did hit some, because I did hear some steel being hit. So honestly, overall, looking at this, these are both just fantastic choices. I'm going to say these are some of the best choices, at least for these particular type firearms. You know, a lot of people might say, well, I didn't use a plus P. Well, part of it is I couldn't find it in stock. I ended up getting the standard pressure, and I figured, well, through a 5-inch barrel, you're essentially getting plus P velocity that you would get out of a plus P out of a 4-inch barrel, but then you're actually reducing that recoil down really low, so it might be a great choice. And if it performs, there's really no reason to go to a plus P. And I would say I was right on thinking that, because that performed fantastic. So I'm going to say, if I had to pick a round for suggesting for a 5-inch pistol, I think that that's going to be one of the better rounds. I would say there's probably no reason to go to a plus P. And with this, you know, I've tested a lot of 327s, and this seems to be performing the best out of all the ones I've tested thus far. You know, because you get that big expansion from an HST bullet, which, you know, creates a lot of cutting and whatnot. And those petals are harder and sharper than typical. So I'm looking at this and I'm getting a little bit of everything. I'm getting that energy dump, but I'm getting also a little bit more than adequate penetration. So I would say this is probably the best choice currently for a round in this particular caliber. So a lot of people will actually tell me, and they'll say to me, well, 327, it's stupid to get because I could never find the ammo. You can't find the ammo anywhere. It's you know, hard to find ammo. Nobody sells it. And yet here I am. I'm not in the industry or anything. I go and I buy it. I buy it at my local stores, every one of them. I go and buy it at all the websites I want. I buy it all the time. It's in stock everywhere. And a lot of people are just so against it because they're like, well, it doesn't make sense because, you know, because I can't find the ammo. I'm going to get a 9mm instead. And they'll go on this whole rant about having 50,000 rounds of ammo. And my way of thinking is that's a really silly way to think about things, because while you can still do that, you can still get a ton of ammo, 50,000 rounds, whatever. That doesn't take away from the fact that this caliber exists, these guns exist, and this is a fantastic option. Like, because this exists and you might get one of these, you have to stop buying 9mm. I just don't get where they're coming up with that stuff. But to me, it's a fantastic cartridge, and I'm going to say 327 Federal currently is a better choice than 357 Magnum. I know it's going to draw a lot of heat here with this, but 357 Magnum and 38 Special are very antiquated cartridges. I love those cartridges. I think they're great options still, but they're antiquated cartridges because while 357 Magnum is technically a lot more powerful than 327 Federal Magnum, the principle of what makes a 357 work is that you're putting a high pressure cartridge with a lot of powder in it. So while that will, produce maybe 50% more power out of a carbine than a 327 Federal, when you put it in a handgun, even a 4-inch handgun, you are losing quite literally half of your power. So you still have to deal with all that recoil while you're wasting half of your potential energy going, from a carbine to let's say a 4-inch revolver. A 327 Federal, it's at a higher pressure. So 357 Magnum's at 35,000 psi currently. At one point it was around 40,000. 327 Federal, they're going to a max pressure of 45,000 psi, and in addition to that, they're putting less powder in it. And what that does is it makes it more efficient because that high pressure will burn up that lower capacity of powder in a shorter distance. So essentially what you're getting is you're getting a cartridge, a bullet that comes out rivaling the energy out of a 357 Magnum in a handgun, even though it's a less powerful cartridge because it's more efficient. So because of that, you're still dealing with less powder and all of that. So you're dealing with less recoil. And the same concept applies to 357 SIG as well. That's better than 357 Magnum for exactly the same reasons. So 327, I'm going to say it's better than 357 Magnum. It's a better choice overall if you're looking to get a legit, cartridge for defense, because it's an efficient modern cartridge that's meant to, do a lot with a lot less recoil. Not to say there's anything wrong with 357 Mag. I love it, but I'm just putting that out there. So back onto this ammo, both of them perform really, really well. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.